Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelove, and this is Speedplay France and Hearts of Iron 4, number 14. We left off with our forces more or less on the borders with the Allied nations, in Europe at least, and we're going to go ahead and send a small group, around 9 armored and mechanized units, over to the English Channel to hopefully cross over and invade the British, in order to really just clamp down on all of that so we don't have to deal with them coming over from the east too quickly. Other than that, we go ahead and set up some attack orders. Since there are so many fronts going on, we're just going to generally give the AI orders to move forward. Switzerland isn't part of the Allies, however, I'm pretty sure they'll join at least some point once we get into the war, so it's good to take care of them earlier rather than later. We also move all of our fighter forces over towards the English Channel area, and just generally get ready to seize control over the English Channel. Now, there's really a few things that we can say right now. We are importing a large amount of our oil and rubber from the Allies, so as soon as we declare the war, we're going to kind of limit the effectiveness of our Air Force and ability to create an Air Force considerably. However, if we're able to just launch a more or less decapitation blow against the Allies, it shouldn't matter too much. Now, the United States will stay in the war. Obviously, that will be a bit of an issue. However, so long as we're able to clean up Europe, including Great Britain, fairly rapidly, I don't think it'll be that much of a concern. So, alright, first things first is I was warned about this, however not before actually recording the video elements of this. And yeah, all of the Allied troops in our country didn't stay exiled. Instead, they just took control over the areas they're around. And now we have to deal with probably something like 100, I'd assume, little pockets of Allied resistance just throughout our country, not just in Europe, but throughout the entire empire, and most likely the Soviet Union territories. So that's going to be a bit annoying to deal with. Nothing too terrible, though. You'll see all across the Soviet Union that's happening. Alright, we also have just terrible resource shortages for Air Force things, so we can't really expect to make very many of those. However, we're trying. We have enough industry that we can probably pump out a decent number anyway. I'm not entirely sure how detrimental it is. And unfortunately, something rather terrible, actually, is that there are apparently quite a few Allied Air Forces just in the English Channel area. Right now, though, we're focusing on just defeating Yugoslavia and Greece. If we're able to just take these two countries out, we will be able to use the majority of our forces elsewhere. That's where most of our armored units are. And yeah, so the English Channel is just overwhelmingly under the control of the English. We are sending our forces out there to try to fight it. However, our Air Force is more valuable and less expendable than the English, since we can't really build it back up very rapidly. Ultimately, we are also rather low on manpower, which is a little worrying. Hopefully we'll be able to make it all work, though. We also are attacking Denmark, which is part of the Allies, and hopefully carving through Yugoslavia and Greece, however, with our armored units just making up the majority of the front line and not using thrusting attacks. It is going a little bit slower than I would like. The Low Countries, however, have been taken over. The air war over the English Channel is just not going very well at all. We're going to keep our units near the launch point for the naval invasion, and probably just move new forces to launch a different invasion from a different location, if we're able to get that all organized. At the moment, we're really just dealing with the Yugoslavs and the Greeks. If we can just take them out, then that gets rid of the closest Allied forces to ourselves, and we'll hopefully just make it so that we have a little bit of breathing room with which to just react against Allied moves and hopefully take the initiative against them. We don't really have that big of an army is a rather apparent and pretty real concern. We are going into Belgrade right now, and we've also managed to cut off some Yugoslav forces, so the Yugoslav war should be fairly rapid now that we're actually taking direct control over these forces. And unfortunately, Spain is falling more or less into the British control. We're probably going to split off a portion of our armored and mechanized units to go take that back and probably move into Africa. Denmark is falling rather quickly, which is nice. And we are moving into Greece proper now, and also just assaulting random Yugoslav elements. So hopefully we'll be able to make considerable gains, hopefully get Yugoslavia to just capitulate. There they go. And alright, so with that said and done, we are probably not actually going to win in the English Channel. We do send our navy out just in an attempt to see if we can't turn the tides, see if our Navy does have some anti-air capabilities. We just need to control it for a moment so we can move forces over. The remaining rump state of Yugoslavian forces is occupied by Greek soldiers, and thus means that the Greeks will probably capitulate rather easily. Denmark is gone. We've taken out a large number of the hostile forces in the area. You'll notice none of our air forces are producing very well. We go ahead and just cancel the English Channel fight. That is just not going our way whatsoever. And right, so with that all said and done, we're going to try to get our Navy out of there, try to park them in various other points. Hopefully that will work at least somewhat well. If we're lucky, we'll also be able to force the Greeks into capitulating. And from there, we'll probably move up against Scandinavia. There are a lot of Allied forces in the former Soviet territories. We're just going to leave them be for now, since all they'll really do is push closer to us, and then we'll just push them back, and they'll be very far from supply lines or anything along those lines. And yeah, so we're just going to generally attack. I believe some country just joined the war. I believe it was Turkey, which is rather unfortunate for us. And we're just going to really have to deal with all of the fighting that just comes from that. If we're lucky, we'll be able to defeat the Greeks relatively quickly. We are on our way to Athens, which should be more or less all we need to do. We are sending forces to Istanbul. At this point, we are finding some difficulties just with the AI wanting to move our armies away from strategically significant positions to go man random, useless parts of the front line. So we go ahead and just get rid of all AI control of our really just armored and mechanized units, since those are too valuable to let the AI control them. And we have to move back towards Athens, since the AI decided that the most important thing wasn't taking the Greek capital. You'll also notice we just panned over. There was quite a bit of Allied forces in the Soviet areas that were trying to fight the Japanese. The Japanese didn't appear to be doing anything against them. Ultimately, though, it's just too chaotic right now for us to really secure very much of anything except for our core areas, which is basically just the middle of Europe. And we've managed to do most of that with the exception of Spain, which has turned against us. Greece, which we're not quite yet done with, despite them having really almost no victory points except for maybe on some island. We can probably just move about their middle territories until they just surrender due to the amount of their countryside occupied. And yeah, Great Britain obviously still independent. We're going to move against the Swiss right now, just because since Turkey did join the Allies, it really legitimizes my fear that neutrals will join the Allies and just stab us in the back while we're not looking. So we're going to have to get rid of first the Greeks to free up all of our forces and get rid of an actual present hostile threat. Then we'll move against the Swiss to get rid of that potential threat while we still have a lot of strength in the middle of Europe. And basically we're following a plan of secure the center, then move out to the peripheries. Europe is the center. There we go. The Greeks have just capitulated. And now we can move out to the peripheries. Mainly Switzerland, though, we really need to take care of that quickly, so we do go ahead and attack. We have a considerable portion of our armored and mechanized elements in that area. And once we free all of those forces up, we can move our infantry probably over to the vague Soviet-ish frontier, and probably also up to Scandinavia. Our armored and mechanized units will probably be split into 2 or 3 groups, maybe even 4. One group will go in probably smallish numbers to the Spanish theater. Another group will go up to Scandinavia and attempt to just force all of that. The third group will probably try to launch another naval invasion. And the fourth group is going to just try to encircle and destroy whatever Allied forces we can find off in the Soviet areas. Right now, though, the most important thing is just the defeat of the Swiss. And it looks as though we are winning despite their rather severe numerical just strength. I wouldn't say advantage or superiority, but they are relatively well armed. Hopefully we'll be able to seize their capital and end the war fairly soon. And it does look as though that will happen relatively in the near future, or in the relatively near future, since we are at 85% on their capital. Alright though, so the strategic position generally is not very great. Everywhere in the periphery is basically falling to the Allied empires. We are also building up more civilian factories. We need to research we need to research the ability to even build artificial fuel and rubber production facilities. That was something I really neglected to build, and it's going to slow down our war effort significantly until we can get that back and really going. Switzerland luckily does capitulate, so now we can move our forces to really all of the trouble spots currently affecting us. The next episode is almost certainly going to start with us just doing a major reorganization of our armed forces, since the current military groups right now are just a chaotic mess that don't have any real basis in the situation on the ground. We're also going to justify a war goal against Sweden so that we can backdoor Norway and hopefully do a naval invasion of Finland, but that all remains to be seen. Luckily though, we've only lost 50,000 men compared to the British, something like 400,000, and other allied armies have lost considerable troops as well. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. With the chaos over, we must now discover where we actually stand.